I never put much stock in gossip. People talk. It's what they do. Most of the time, it's harmless. Office drama, exaggerated stories about someone's weekend, whispers about who's cheating on who. I never cared much for it. My life was simple. Work, home, sleep, repeat. My marriage had its ups and downs like any other, but I never thought I'd be on the receiving end of a story that people whispered about in hushed voices. That changed on a cold Thursday afternoon when Amanda, my wife's closest friend, asked to meet me for coffee. I hesitated before agreeing. Something about the way she texted me felt off. Amanda and I weren't exactly close. We saw each other at barbecues, birthdays, the occasional dinner party when my wife insisted. But she'd never reached out to me like this, never asked to meet alone. That alone was enough to put me on edge. Still, I went. Maybe out of curiosity. Maybe because I already knew, on some level, that something wasn't right. The cafe was small and quiet, tucked away from the main road, the kind of place where people pretended to be busy with their laptops while eavesdropping on conversations around them. The scent of roasted coffee beans and vanilla filled the air. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. Amanda was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner table, stirring her drink with slow, deliberate movements. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes flicked to me the second I stepped inside. That's when I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't good. I sat across from her, waiting. She looked tense, uncomfortable, like she didn't want to be the one saying what she was about to say. But she didn't waste time. "Your wife is sleeping with someone at her office." The words landed like a sledgehammer to my chest. I stared at her, waiting for some kind of follow-up, some kind of clarification that would make this make sense. But she just looked at me, steady and unblinking, waiting for me to process it. A strange sound left my throat, something between a scoff and a laugh, but there was no humor in it. This had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. Amanda was wrong. She had to be. "Why are you telling me this?" My voice came out calmer than I felt. Amanda sighed, setting her spoon down with a soft clink against the saucer. "Because you deserve to know," she said. "And because she's not going to tell you." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest, forcing myself to stay composed even though my heart was hammering inside my ribcage. My mind started spinning, running through all the possibilities. Was Amanda lying? Did she have some kind of vendetta against my wife? Maybe they had a falling out, and this was her way of getting revenge. But Amanda wasn't the type to spread lies just for the hell of it. And deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. The signs had been there for months. The sudden late nights at work. The way my wife had started paying more attention to her appearance before heading to the office. New clothes, more makeup, perfume I hadn't smelled on her before. The way she guarded her phone like it held government secrets, never leaving it on the table, always keeping it face down. I'd ignored it all, convinced myself I was being paranoid, told myself that marriages go through phases, that people get busy, that distance doesn't always mean something's wrong. One idiot. Amanda reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She hesitated for a second before pushing it across the table toward me. "I can prove it," she said. "I have screenshots." My stomach dropped. Screenshots. That meant there was no misunderstanding. No maybe about it. If she had proof, then it was real. And if it was real, then my wife, the woman I'd built a life with, the woman I'd trusted, was lying to my face every single day. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I grabbed the phone, my fingers tightening around it, and forced myself to read. The texts weren't vague. They weren't friendly or playful in a way that could be explained away. They were filth, raw and undeniable. Explicit messages, plans to meet up, times, dates, locations, jokes about how he doesn't suspect a thing. That he was me. I felt something cold settle in my gut, a slow-burning rage that coiled tighter and tighter the longer I stared at the screen. I'd been making dinner for her while she was sending these messages. I'd kissed her goodbye in the mornings while she was counting down the hours until she could see him again. A co-worker. It made sense in a sick, twisted way. She spent hours with him every day. They had lunch together, shared inside jokes, sent messages back and forth. I met most of them at office parties, shaken their hands, smiled like a fool. I bet I'd even talked to the guy. Amanda shifted in her seat, watching me carefully. "I know this is a lot," she said. I let out a slow breath through my nose, forcing my hands to stay flat on the table instead of balling into fists. My pulse was a dull roar in my ears, but I made sure my face gave nothing away. No outbursts. Not yet. I placed the phone back down, sliding it toward her. "Thanks," I said, my voice rough, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Amanda hesitated. "Are you okay?" I almost laughed. "Okay." No, I wasn't okay. I wasn't even in the same universe as okay. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the floor loud enough to make a few people glance in our direction. Amanda flinched slightly, but I ignored her. Without another word, I stood and walked out. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I barely felt it. My mind was already racing ahead, running through my next steps. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't sad. I wasn't lost in self-pity. I was furious. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I don't remember driving home. I must have. I got in my truck, turned the key, and, at some point, I ended up back at the house. But the moments in between were a blur. My hands were tight on the wheel the entire time, white-knuckled, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. Rage wasn't even the right word for what I felt. It was something bigger, something deeper. A fire that had been lit in my gut, growing with every second, consuming everything else. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. For a moment, I just stood there in the entryway, staring at the space we had built together. The framed photos on the wall, the shoes by the door, the stupid little scented candle she always bought. It all felt wrong now. Like a stranger lived here. Like I had stepped into someone else's life by mistake. I wanted to smash something. Instead, I forced myself to move, to think. I wasn't the kind of man who reacted blindly, who let his anger control him. No, I needed a plan. I needed to know exactly how I was going to destroy her world the way she had just shattered mine. But first, I needed more than just text on Amanda's phone. I needed confirmation from a source. My wife, Melanie, wasn't home yet. She was probably still at work, or maybe out with him. Maybe lying to me through a text about how she was stuck in a meeting while she was actually in some cheap motel room. That thought sent another wave of rage through me, but I swallowed it down. I couldn't lose control. Not yet. I walked through the house slowly, looking at everything with new eyes. The couch where we had sat together so many nights, watching movies, talking about our day. The dining table where we had shared meals, laughing about stupid things. Our bedroom, where she had laid beside me every night, pretending like everything was fine. She had kissed me, hugged me, slept next to me, and the whole time, she had been lying. My hands curled into fists, nails digging into my palms. I made my way to our closet, yanking open the door. Melanie wasn't the most organized person. I had learned to live with her mess over the years. But her side of the closet was noticeably more put together than usual. Too neat. I reached up, pulling down a few shoeboxes from the shelf, going through them one by one. Old photos, receipts, junk she had hoarded over the years. And then, at the bottom of the last box, I found something that made my blood run cold. A small, pink envelope. It looked ordinary at first, just a card tucked inside. But when I pulled it out and flipped it open, my stomach twisted into a knot so tight, I thought I might be sick. "I can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. You drive me crazy, you know that? Counting the days until I can have you all to myself." There was no name signed at the bottom, just a little heart. I stood there, staring at it, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't just some meaningless fling. This wasn't some drunken mistake she regretted. This was a full-blown affair. Planned, thought out, repeated. I took a breath, slow and deep, forcing the rage back down before it consumed me completely. I wasn't done yet. I went to her nightstand, pulling open the drawer. Her phone charger, a few old receipts, a bottle of perfume I had bought for her last Christmas, and then her work ID badge. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. Her picture stared back at me, smiling. She had taken this to work every day, the same office where he was. I put it down, my fingers itching to grab something, to break something, to throw it all to hell. Instead, I stepped back. I had enough proof now. I knew the truth. And the next step was making sure she knew I knew. I wasn't going to wait for her to come home and play innocent. I grabbed my phone, scrolled to her number, and called. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hey, babe." Her voice was light, casual. She sounded normal, like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't living a double life. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. "Where are you?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Still at work," she said without hesitation. "Got caught up in a late meeting. I should be home soon." Lie. A blatant, bold-faced lie. I closed my eyes for a second, inhaling through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. "Not yet. Don't explode yet." "Okay," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Drive safe." I hung up before she could say anything else. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone in my hands. My mind was racing, but one thought stood out above the rest. She had no idea that I knew, and that was my advantage. Let her walk through that door thinking everything is fine. Let her sit across from me at dinner, lie to my face, act like she's the loving wife she pretends to be. And then, when she least expects it, I'd rip her world apart. I sat on the edge of our bed, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. She was still at work. At least, that's what she wanted me to believe. A late meeting, she said. A lie, straight out of her mouth, spoken so effortlessly it made my stomach churn. How many times had she fed me those same words? How many nights had I sat at this very table, eating dinner alone while she was out there, in some hotel room, tangled up with someone else? I stared at the pink envelope sitting beside me. The words inside still burned in my mind. Counting the days until I can't have you all to myself. The sheer arrogance of it was staggering. Not only had she betrayed me, but she had left evidence of it right under our roof, right under my nose. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my thumb over my temple. I needed to stay in control. There were two ways this could go. I could explode the second she walked in, scream, smash things, let my rage take over. That's what she would expect. That's what cheaters always expect. They count on the chaos, the anger, the tears. But I wasn't going to give her that. No, I was going to make her sweat. I grabbed my phone again, scrolling back through our old messages. It was like looking at a history book filled with lies. All those texts about working late and grabbing drinks with the girls. Little emojis, heart symbols, miss you texts that suddenly felt like insults. I clicked on the text thread with Amanda instead. "Thanks for telling me. Do you know his name?" She responded almost immediately. "I think it's someone named Jared. I don't know him personally, but I've heard her mention him before." Jared. I let the name settle in my mind. I knew a Jared. He was at the last office party, tall, good-looking in a smug, corporate kind of way. A guy with a firm handshake and an easy smile. The kind of guy who thought he could take what he wanted without consequence. I checked the time. She'd be home soon. I needed to be ready. I stood up, rolling my shoulders, shaking off the stiffness that had settled into my limbs. My mind was a war zone, thoughts clashing against each other at full speed. I could feel the fire in my chest, growing hotter with every second, but I wouldn't let it consume me. Not yet. I moved around the house, adjusting little things, straightening the dining chairs, setting the table for dinner like I did every night. I wanted everything to feel normal when she walked in. I wanted her to see the house exactly as she had left it. Because the second she realized something was off, that I knew, I wanted to see the look in her eyes when her world collapsed. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway sent a jolt through my spine. Showtime. I didn't move right away. I stood by the kitchen counter, gripping the edge, inhaling slow, steady breaths. I wanted to feel calm, even if I wasn't. The front door clicked open, and then her voice. "Hey, babe," she called out. "Sorry I'm late." Her tone was light, casual. The voice of a woman who had just spent hours betraying her husband and felt nothing. I glanced at my watch. 8:37 p.m. I forced a smile onto my face before turning toward her. "Hey," I said smoothly. "Long day." She sighed dramatically, setting her bag down on the counter. "You have no idea. Meetings, emails, and then some idiot in the office printer jammed up the whole system. I thought I'd never get out of there. A full performance. Oscar-worthy." I nodded, playing along. "Tough day, huh?" She walked over and wrapped her arms around me, pressing her body close like she had done 1,000 times before. And for the first time in our marriage, her touch made my skin crawl. I could smell her perfume, the same one she always wore, but now I wondered if he had smelled it too. Had she put on, just for him? Had she pressed up against him the same way? Whispered into his ear the way she used to whisper into mine? The thought sent a wave of disgust through me, but I swallowed it down. Not yet. She pulled back, smiling up at me, completely unaware. I'm starving, she said, moving toward the dining table. Did you eat yet? I shook my head. No, I waited for you. Her smile widened, and for a second, I wanted to punch a hole through the wall. We sat down. I watched as she reached for her fork, her movements so normal, so effortless, like she hadn't just spent the evening desecrating our vows. So, she said, twirling pasta onto her fork, how was your day? I tilted my head slightly, watching her. How was my day? My day was spent finding out my wife was sleeping with a coworker, reading the filth she sent him, feeling my stomach turn as I realized how long I'd been played. But instead, I just shrugged. Nothing special. She nodded, chewing, completely oblivious. And that's when I knew. She really thought I was clueless. She really believed she had fooled me. That I was the same man I was yesterday, the same trusting fool who would kiss her goodnight, hold her in my arms, tell her I loved her. But that man was gone. I leaned back in my chair, watching her with a small smile. I ran into Amanda today. The fork froze halfway to her mouth. She blinked too quickly, forced a laugh. Oh, what did she say? I shrugged. Not much. Just catching up. She nodded slowly, but I could see it now. The stiffness in her posture, the way her eyes darted toward me for just a fraction of a second longer than usual. She was nervous. She didn't know what Amanda had told me. Good. I kept my expression neutral, taking another bite of my food. Let her wonder. Let her stew in it. Let her feel that creeping, slow-building anxiety crawl up her spine. I wasn't going to confront her tonight. No, I wanted her to have one last peaceful sleep before I burned her entire world to the ground. That night, I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling. She was asleep, or at least pretending to be. Her breathing was steady, her body still, but I knew my wife well enough to recognize when something was off. Maybe it was the slight tension in her shoulders, the way she didn't shift or roll over like she usually did. She was thinking. Good. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see her face in the dim light. Her features were relaxed, peaceful even, but I knew better. Inside, she was unraveling. I had given her nothing. No accusations. No signs that I knew. Just one simple sentence. I ran into Amanda today. That was all it took to plant the seed. Now, that seed would grow, twisting itself around her thoughts, suffocating her peace. I didn't know how much Amanda had told her. Maybe she had already texted her, tried to warn her. Maybe Melanie was already forming a plan, rehearsing excuses in her head, coming up with the lies she'd need to tell me in case I started asking the wrong questions. Or maybe she still believed she was safe. Either way, it didn't matter. I had time, and time was on my side. I rolled onto my side, facing away from her. My mind was racing, my pulse steady but strong. The rage inside me was no longer a fire. It was something colder now. Sharper, more controlled. I had a plan, but before I could execute it, I needed to be absolutely sure. Melanie had spent months, maybe longer, living a double life. Sneaking around behind my back, lying in my face. She had played her part so well that I had never even suspected it. Now it was my turn. She wanted to play games? Fine. I would be the one writing the rules from now on. The next morning, I woke up before she did. That wasn't unusual. I always woke up early for work. But today, I wasn't going to the office. Today, I had other business to take care of. I got up quietly, showered, got dressed like it was just another normal day. I even kissed her on the forehead before I left. I wanted everything to feel the same to her. She barely stirred. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and walked out the door, feeling the crisp morning air hit my face. As soon as I was in my truck, I pulled out my phone and called Amanda. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said cautiously. Did you talk to her? Not yet, I said, but I will. Amanda hesitated. What are you going to do? I didn't answer right away, because truthfully, I didn't know yet. I had a dozen ideas. Some brutal, some calculated. Some that would make her regret ever meeting me, let alone betraying me. But I wasn't going to let my emotions drive this. I needed to be smarter than that. I need more, I finally said. Amanda sighed. I told you everything I know. You told me what you heard. I corrected. Now I need proof. Something undeniable. There was a pause. Like what? Like when they meet up, I said. How often? If they're together right now. Amanda hesitated again, and I could tell she was wrestling with the morality of it. But I didn't have the luxury of guilt. Finally, she spoke. There's someone at the office who might know. A friend of mine. She's seen them together before. Talk to her, I said. Find out everything you can. And then what? Then I'll handle the rest. I hung up before she could say anything else. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for answers to fall into my lap. I needed to see it for myself. I knew where Melanie worked. I had been there before. Office parties, holiday events. I had shaken hands with her coworkers, made small talk with her boss. I had probably stood in the same damn room as the man she was sleeping with. The thought made my grip tighten around the steering wheel. I parked a block away from her building and sat there for a moment, watching. The place was busy, people coming and going, some with coffee in their hands, others talking on their phones. I wondered how many of them had secrets of their own. I wasn't planning on going inside. Not yet. Instead, I waited. And then, at exactly 12:07 p.m., I saw her. Melanie walked out of the building, her hair perfect, her smile bright. And she wasn't alone. Jared. I recognized him immediately. Tall, blonde, dressed in a crisp button-up like he had just stepped out of a damn cologne commercial. He looked exactly like the kind of guy who thought he was untouchable. They walked side by side, talking, laughing, heading toward the parking garage across the street. I felt my pulse spike. I could have confronted them right then and there. I could have walked right up, said his name, watched their faces go pale. Watched my wife realize that her perfect little web of lies was collapsing. But no, not yet. Instead, I started my truck and pulled out, following from a distance. I needed to see exactly where they went. They drove to a hotel. Not a fancy one. One of those anonymous places off the highway, the kind where people went when they didn't want to be seen. They pulled into the lot, parked, and walked inside together without hesitation. No second glances. No checking over their shoulders. They were comfortable. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't their first time. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my jaw clenched so tight it felt like my teeth might crack. I had suspected. I had known. But seeing it with my own eyes? That was different. That was the moment the last shred of doubt disappeared. She was mine. My wife. My partner. The woman I had built a life with. And she had walked into that hotel with him like it was nothing. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to unclench my fists. I had everything I needed now. The truth, the proof, the final confirmation. And now, it was time for me to decide exactly how I was going to ruin her. I sat in my truck outside that damn hotel, watching the entrance like a predator watching prey. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows over the pavement. The parking lot wasn't full. Just a handful of cars scattered around, most of them cheap rentals or vehicles belonging to people who didn't want to be traced back to this place. Just like them. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel, slow and deliberate. I wasn't breathing heavily. I wasn't shaking. The rage inside me had settled into something quieter now, something lethal. I had followed them here for a reason, not because I needed more proof. I had more than enough. The texts. The pink envelope, the whispers from Amanda, and now this. Watching my wife walk into a cheap hotel in broad daylight with her coworker like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't need any more confirmation. No, I had followed them here because I wanted to see what kind of woman I was really married to. I needed to witness with my own eyes how deep the betrayal ran, and I needed to decide exactly how to destroy her. I waited. Minutes turned into half an hour. Half an hour turned into an hour. I watched people come and go, workers stepping outside for a smoke, guests checking in and out. But I didn't move. Then, finally, after 1 hour and 22 minutes, the door opened. And there she was. Melanie stepped outside first, her hair slightly messier than before, but still perfect in that effortless way she always managed. She adjusted her blouse, smoothing out the fabric like she was leaving a damn business meeting instead of a hotel bed. And right behind her, Jared. I felt my fingers tighten on the wheel, pressing against the textured surface hard enough to leave marks on my skin. They walked to her car together, close but not touching. She was careful, I'd give her that, but not careful enough. Not careful enough to stop smiling up at him, tilting her head slightly as he whispered something in her ear. She looked happy. Happy. The same woman who had kissed me goodbye this morning. The same woman who had laid in bed beside me the night before, her body warm against mine, her breath slow and even. And now she was standing in a sunlit parking lot, smiling at a man who wasn't her husband. She was living two lives, and she thought she could get away with it. I exhaled slowly through my nose, forcing myself to stay seated, to not get out of the truck and grab Jared by the collar, slam him against the hood of her car, make him feel even a fraction of the anger burning inside me. But that wasn't the plan. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took a picture. One, then another, then a third just to be sure. There. Evidence, time-stamped. Melanie opened her car door, sliding inside with practiced ease, and Jared turned away, walking toward his own vehicle like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just spent the last hour and a half desecrating my marriage. I watched him pull out first, merging onto the highway like any regular, unsuspecting man heading back to work. Like he hadn't just ripped apart someone else's life for his own amusement. Melanie lingered in her car for a moment, checking her phone, probably texting him, maybe deleting messages, cleaning up her tracks, just in case. But she was too late. I had already seen everything. She finally started the engine and pulled out, taking the opposite direction from Jared, probably heading home to shower off whatever was left of him before walking through our front door and greeting me with a kiss. Like nothing had happened. Like she wasn't the worst kind of liar. I let her go. I didn't follow, because I didn't need it anymore. Now it was my turn to start playing the game. I drove home slow, not because I was hesitating, not because I was second-guessing myself. I just needed to think. There were 1,000 ways this could go. I could wait until she got home, sit her down, tell her what I knew, watch her scramble for excuses, watch her lie to my face again, maybe even cry, act like she was sorry, promise it had meant nothing. I could let her believe she still had a chance to fix this. Or I could blindside her. I could act like nothing was wrong. Let her fall asleep next to me one last time. Let her think everything was still in her control. Then, when she least expected it, I'd rip her world apart. I could make her regret every single second she spent with him. I gritted my teeth, staring at the road ahead, watching as the familiar streets of my neighborhood came into view. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was already there. She was home. I sat there for a moment, staring at the front door, my fingers tapping against the steering wheel. This was it. The last time I'd ever walk into that house as the man I used to be. I inhaled deep, exhaled slow, and stepped out of the truck. The moment I walked in, I could smell the faint trace of her perfume in the air. That same scent she had probably worn for him. "Hey, babe." Her voice rang out from the kitchen, bright and cheerful, like she had spent the afternoon reading a book instead of getting off in a hotel bed with another man. I swallowed down the bile, rising in my throat. She was standing by the stove, stirring something in a pot, her back turned to me. Everything about her posture was relaxed. She had no idea. "How was work?" she asked without looking back. "Same as always." I lied smoothly, setting my keys on the counter. She hummed in response, like she wasn't a goddamn fraud. "Dinner's almost ready." I walked up behind her, close enough that I could see the curve of her neck, the way a few strands of hair had fallen loose from her ponytail. I could smell them on her. It was faint, barely there, but I knew. I forced my hands to stay at my sides, forced myself to swallow down the fury clawing its way up my throat. Now wasn't the time. I leaned in, pressing a slow kiss to her temple. She didn't flinch. She really thought she was safe. I pulled back, watching as she continued stirring the pot like nothing had changed. She had no idea that she was about to lose everything. The smell of dinner filled the kitchen, something creamy, rich, probably one of those dishes she knew I liked. I bet she felt proud of herself, standing there, cooking for me after spending the afternoon in a hotel bed with another man. She had no idea she was standing at the edge of a cliff, no idea that with one small push, I was about to send her entire world plummeting into the abyss. And she deserved it. She deserved every ounce of what was coming to her. But I wasn't going to rush it. I pulled out a chair at the dining table, watching her move, studying the little details I had ignored before. The way she hummed softly under her breath. The way she checked her phone quickly, glancing at the screen before slipping it back in her pocket. Probably texting him, or deleting messages. She turned around with a smile, holding up a spoon. Want a taste? I stood slowly, walking toward her. How many times had she done this before? How many nights had she stood here, cooking for me, after coming back from being with him? I took the spoon from her hand, letting my fingers graze hers as I brought it to my lips. The food was good. It always was. But it tasted like poison in my mouth. I set the spoon down, nodding like I was impressed. Perfect, I murmured. Her eyes lit up. Liner came easier than I expected. She went back to cooking, and I sat down again, pulling out my phone. The picture I had taken earlier, the one of her and Jared outside the hotel, was right there on my screen, staring back at me. I could have sent it to her right then. I could have slid my phone across the table, watched her face as she saw the evidence. Watched her panic. Watched her scramble for an excuse, a way out, some pathetic lie to explain what she had been doing. But I wanted more than that. I wanted to make her feel hunted. Dinner was quiet. I ate slowly, forcing myself to act normal. She still had no idea. She chatted about her day, telling me about work, leaving out the part where she'd spent over an hour with Jared in a hotel room. I nodded along, pretending to listen. When she finished eating, she reached for her phone again, glancing at it quickly before standing up to clear the dishes. That was my cue. I took my phone out, opened our messages, and sent her a single text. Are you lying to me? She didn't react right away. She picked up her plate, walked toward the sink, started rinsing it. Then I saw it, the subtle glance down at her phone, the way her body stiffened ever so slightly. She turned off the faucet, drying her hands with slow, careful movements. Then she picked up her phone, reading my message. I didn't move. I just watched her. She turned around after a few seconds, her face unreadable. What's that supposed to mean? I shrugged, locking my phone and setting it down. Just a question. She forced out a small laugh. A question about what? I let the silence stretch, leaning back in my chair, tilting my head slightly. Is there something you need to tell me, Melanie? Her fingers curled around the edge of the counter. No. Should there be? I held her gaze. For the first time since I'd walked through the door, I saw it. Fear. It was subtle, barely there, but I knew her too well. Her shoulders were tense, her breathing just a little too controlled. She was trying to figure out how much I knew. I stood up slowly, walking toward her. She didn't move. I stopped just a few feet away, keeping my voice even. Where were you this afternoon? Her brows furrowed. I told you. At work. I nodded, pretending to consider her words. The whole time, her mouth opened slightly, then closed. A pause. Barely a second long, but enough. That was the moment I knew she had nothing. No excuse ready. No alibi. She didn't expect me to ask. She had gotten so comfortable in her lies that she never even considered that I might be watching. She forced out a breath, shaking her head. Babe, what is this? Why are you asking me this? I exhaled slowly, stepping even closer, until we were just inches apart. I could see the way her throat bobbed as she swallowed, how her eyes flickered to the side. She was looking for an escape, but there wasn't one. You're lying to me, Melanie. Her lips parted, like she wanted to deny it, but she hesitated. That hesitation sealed her fate. I didn't say anything else. I just pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and turned the screen toward her. The photo was right there, crystal clear. Her, standing outside the hotel. Jared beside her, her face drained of color. She didn't speak, didn't breathe, didn't move. And for the first time in our marriage, I saw my wife completely and utterly powerless. I let the moment stretch, watching her reaction, memorizing it. Then I tilted my head slightly. Try again. Her lips trembled. She blinked rapidly, looking down, then back at me, like she was trying to come up with something, anything, that would save her. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. It's not what it looks like. I almost laughed. Not what it looks like. The oldest lie in the book. Really? I asked, tilting my head. Because it looks like my wife spent the afternoon at a hotel with another man. Her breathing picked up. I was meeting a co-worker. I smiled, slow and cold. I know. She flinched. Her eyes darted away again, her mind scrambling. We just talked. That's it. I let the silence sit between us, let her choke on it. Then I took another step forward, lowering my voice just enough to make her lean in slightly, like she was waiting for me to believe her. I wanted her to see the moment her world shattered. So I dropped the hammer. Tell me, Melanie, I whispered. Did you think about me while you were fucking him? Her mouth fell open. She staggered back like I had slapped her. That's when I saw it. The collapse. The mask she had worn for months. Asterisk, asterisk, maybe years. Asterisk, asterisk, finally cracking, breaking into 1,000 pieces. She had no more lies left. Nothing to hide behind. Only the cold, undeniable truth. I knew. I had always known. And now it was time to burn it all to the ground. The silence between us stretched so thick I could almost hear her heartbeat hammering inside her chest. She stood there, frozen, staring at me like a deer caught in headlights. Like a criminal caught in the act, but too stupid to know whether to run or beg. She knew. She knew there was no getting out of this. Her lips parted, trembled, but no words came out. Her breathing was quick, shallow. I watched her chest rise and fall, the way her fingers twitched slightly, gripping the countertop like she needed something to hold on to. She was unraveling, and I wasn't going to stop it. I leaned against the kitchen table, crossing my arms, waiting, letting her drown in the weight of what she had done. No shouting, no throwing things, no dramatic outbursts, just cold, suffocating silence. That was worse, because it forced her to fill the empty space. And that's exactly what she did. Babe, she finally whispered, her voice breaking. Please, I can explain. Explain? I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that made her flinch. Oh, this should be good, I said, tilting my head. Go ahead. Explain to me how my wife ended up in a hotel room with another man in the middle of the day. I'd love to hear it. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel a single ounce of sympathy. Not anymore. She shook her head quickly, stepping closer, like she thought touching me would fix this. It was just a mistake. I raised an eyebrow. A mistake. She nodded desperately, her hands reaching for mine. I let her grab them, let her feel my skin, let her think for 1 second that she still had a chance. Then I pulled away. Her face crumpled. I could see it in her eyes, the shift. Realization sinking in. She had lost. There was no coming back from this. And now she was afraid. Not of me. No. I had never laid a hand on her, never raised my voice in anger, never made her feel unsafe. But she was afraid of what she had done. Afraid of the consequences. Afraid of what life would look like when I walked out of it. I let her stand there, blinking rapidly, wiping at her face as if she could erase what she had done with tears alone. Then, finally, I spoke again. Who is he? She stiffened. Her eyes darted to the side. I felt my patience thinning. Say his name. She swallowed hard. It doesn't matter. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Say his name, Melanie. She hesitated, her throat bobbing, fingers shaking at her sides. Then, finally she whispered it. Jared. I let the name hang between us, nodding slowly. So you're admitting it? She hesitated again. I could see the war inside her head. She wanted to keep lying, wanted to find some way to manipulate her way out of this, but it was too late for that. So she nodded. A tiny, pitiful movement. I clenched my jaw, feeling the anger swirl deep in my chest. Not just at her. At him. The smug bastard who had shaken my hand at our office parties, smiled at me, looked me in the eyes knowing damn well he was screwing my wife behind my back. That rage? That was different. That was something I was going to deal with separately. Right now, I needed to focus on her. You disgust me, I said quietly. She let out a small, wounded sound, like she had just been physically struck. Good. She deserved it. I stepped back, running a hand over my face, taking a slow breath to keep my emotions in check. How long? She didn't answer. My eyes snapped to hers. How long? She shuddered, arms wrapping around herself like she could shrink into nothing. A few months. Liar. I shook my head. Try again. Her lips quivered. She hesitated too long. 6 months, she admitted, barely above a whisper. 6 months. I let out a sharp breath, feeling something inside me snap. 6 months of lying. 6 months of coming home to me, kissing me, eating dinner with me, crawling into my bed after being with him. I clenched my fists, staring at her like I had never seen her before. Because I hadn't. The woman in front of me, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was a stranger, and I wanted nothing to do with her. She stepped closer, eyes wide, desperate. Babe, please. I don't. My voice was cold, sharper than steel. Do not call me that. She froze. Tears spilled over her cheeks now, but they meant nothing to me. She had thrown away everything we had. For what? For him? I grabbed my keys from the counter, ignoring her frantic movements. Wait, where are you going? I laughed, shaking my head as I turned toward the door. What? You think we're going to sit down and talk this out? You think I'm going to hug you, tell you we can work through this? Her breath hitched. I don't know. I stepped through the doorway, turning one last time to look at her. And when I spoke, my voice was final. I hope he was worth it. Then I walked out. I didn't stop driving until I was halfway across town. I didn't answer my phone. Not when she called. Not when she texted. Not when Amanda sent me a message asking if I was okay. I wasn't. I pulled into a parking lot, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My chest rose and fell, breath steady, but my mind? It was anything but calm. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. She wasn't the only one responsible for this. And Jared? Jared was about to learn exactly what happens when you screw over the wrong man.